You must have heard the rhyme, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me, or names will never hurt me. It's a child's way of encouraging themselves, of building resilience and thick skin. You can't hurt me, but it does hurt, doesn't it, when you're a kid? Is a chant enough to shield us from the harshness of reality, especially in these times of uncertainty and frequent disappointment? You've seen the Chinese, they're very upset at what we've done. Does it really mean to develop thick skin? Motivational speaker Paul Wood has the answers. Well, hope so. And he joins us now. Good Paul. If you haven't got the answers, mate, why not? Good morning.
Yeah, morning.
What does it? Yeah, always good to have you here, mate. And what does it take to have a thick skin?
I think one of the main things is to get better at actually discerning whose opinions we want to pay attention to. I want you to think about this, right? We evolved to be members of relatively small tribes where we needed to pay attention to everyone's opinion because our contribution in the tribe determined whether we got to survive, share the benefits of community living, or whether we were such a dick we got kicked out and we died pretty quickly. So there's really good evolutionary origins behind that concern. But the problem is now we inhabit a world where you can be exposed to about 8 billion opinions.
In 1 minute.
In 1 minute.
Yeah.
And they're not all from people who care about you, who know you, who are actually interested in your well-being.
But we give them and we elevate. I'm so agree with you here. I've agreed with nothing more than this so much. In fact, we even have our bosses reacting to, let's say, someone's rant on Twitter or someone's rant on Facebook, and they can form an opinion of you based on this one person who we don't know who they are. We don't even know if they exist.
No, and look, I think there's a really simple rule of thumb that you can use to help you get better at this, and that is, if it's not someone you'd ask for advice, you don't want to pay attention to their criticism. If I wouldn't ask you for advice, why on earth do I care what you have to say about me in a negative sense?
You've never asked me for advice on anything.
Oh, well, but this is...
You know what I'm saying? But no, I know what you're saying, because there are screeds and screeds of feedback when it comes to even things like what we do and what everyone does in society. It's on stuff, it's on the Herald websites, it's all on our news hub, it's everywhere there's feedback. And how do you get through this slog? You know?
Well, I think, again, part of it is just limiting your exposure. I mean, I'm someone, of course, who has a background that lends itself to not everyone liking me.
Well, remind people you're convicted of...
Yeah, I was convicted of murder at 18. I spent, 11 years in prison. Fortunately, I've managed to turn my life around. And one of the key things in being able to turn my life around is going, well, what is actually important to me? What are my values? How can I get better at living those on a daily basis? And that's how I measure myself.
Did you clearly had a thin skin as a teenager because you...
Absolutely, and it's really interesting.
Reacted in a bad way.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that I like to do when I go back into the prison environment and when I talk to people is I actually like to take along one of the emails that I receive from someone and read it out to them and then ask them, how they think I should respond to it. And it's a good example of someone carrying around a lot of rage who directed that at me, and I read that and I look at it and I go, okay, well, that's someone who's not happy in their life.
What do they say to you? What's the
it varies, that's the thing.
Well, I get lots of letters from prisoners. Lots of letters from prisoners. Yeah. And I read every one of them.
Yeah, and it varies because the sorts of ideas that get you into prison are reflected by some of the responses. I had one young guy who said, well, I'd find them and I'd kidnap them and I'd do this, and I'm like, yeah, that's why you are where you are. Yeah. And then you get the older hands who go, I wouldn't pay attention to it. And I think that's part of the journey, eh? And like you were saying, I think when you're younger, unfortunately, you're so wedded and interested to other people's views and opinions of you that it really does constrain your ability to have a better, more meaningful life. Whereas hopefully as we get older, we get better at going, well, who do we want to have a thin skin with? Who are the people who really care about us and matter to us, whose advice we'd seek? So we do want to be positively or negatively impacted. So it's
okay. I'm coming to you in a second, Amanda. We are allowed to have a thin skin. It's okay to have a thin skin if the people matter. Not
only is it okay, it's crucial. Because at the extreme, we form such a thick skin that we're not impacted by anyone's views or opinions. And as a result of that, we live a more impoverished life where we don't have really genuine connections with other people. We don't have great intimacy. But not only that, we're not really open to the ideas and views and opinions that will help us get better at being who we want to be in the world. If you're not concerned by anyone's feedback, then you don't really have the motivation to change and grow in the way that you do if someone who cares about you, whose opinion you trust, holds up the mirror to you and you go, you know what, here's an opportunity for me to be better at being who I want to be in the world because your opinion matters.
Well said.
That's actually really well said. And you just touched on being behind bars, obviously, in a previous life. Did you have moments in that time that you wanted to give up? And it would have been a tough environment. And how did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, look, wanting to give up, I mean, look, let's go at the extreme end. I think at the extreme end, I think anyone who's looking at a period of imprisonment seriously does consider suicide. It's a very viable option in terms of the circumstances you're in. I mean, one thing to remember about your brain is constantly trying to solve problems, and it's giving you solutions, but it's not determining what are the good solutions versus the poor solutions a lot of the time. And so everyone has that sort of thought. I think I was lucky enough where I had already developed enough resilience through challenging experiences in life and just having some natural tendencies which were beneficial for me to not go that route. But always considerations of giving up. But you got to proceed, you got to carry on, and you got to know it can get better and it will get better. This won't be forever.
Mark, we'll come to you next. Did you consider suicide?
Yeah, of course.
And how did you manage to stay alive and away from that thought?
Well, it's interesting. You know, in my early years, I just escaped from reality because I didn't really have the tools. I just carried on doing drugs while I was in prison. That's what I did. That was a big part of it. But also as well, you know, I tried to focus on the small things that were more enjoyable that I could do during the day, even if it was really small stuff. And also as well, I always had this belief that there was a tomorrow. And that's one of the key things we know. Hope, right? So if we talk about hope, like the psychology around learned optimism is based on three things. If you want to get better at really moving through adversity and challenge and coming out the other side, you need to be able to realise that this won't be forever. There'll be an end to the story. You also need to realise that even if it feels like everything is terrible, there will be some good stuff going on. You can't let the source of your stress and pressure be like a drop of ink in a glass of water that discolours everything. And also as well, you have to recognise it's not personal. It's not about you and because of you, because you're not good enough and it only happens to you. We all experience misery and suffering and challenge in our lives in different ways. You know, I've spoken to people who have been in state care as kids and ended up in prison and that, who have the standard hard life we think about. But I've also spoken to people who have been at the highest end boarding schools where they've had equal misery and suffering. You know, we all have it. It's not about us. It's not about us not being good enough. It's just part of the human experience. And if you can depersonalise it, if you can recognise it won't be forever, if you can recognise that even in the worst circumstances, there will be some things that are going okay, you'll pass through it so much more effectively.
I'm going to take you back a little in the interview and challenge you now.
Good.
On your, and I hope you can take it. One of the keys to this was about, you know, only sort of listening to criticisms and the likes from people who you would seek advice from. Well, I would seek advice from, I would have sought advice from Shane Warne on me as a cricketer. But I sure as hell wouldn't have sought any advice on me as a person. So it's not as simple as that.
No, this is fantastic though, Mark, because what I'm talking about and what you want to have a thick skin about, and what you want to be selective about, is opinions about you. But what you want to be completely open to and curious about is your opinions about the world and about things. If you are not open to hearing different views and opinions about the world and how to operate in the world, then you really reduce your ability to grow as a human being. This is one of the problems that we have today, is that people think that if someone has a different view or opinion of them or of the world, or they see the world in a different way, and that makes them feel an uncomfortable emotion, then that's some kind of personal attack on them. That's something that they need to avoid or argue against, instead of going, oh, okay, this emotion's sending me a signal that perhaps this is something I want to think about more, and that there might be alternative views here.
But too many people are just from Mark there. Too many people are personalising that. You see, so if I hold a different view to someone, then someone might say, "Well, hang on, that's racist." No, I hold a different view on whether this person should or should not be in New Zealand for these reasons, or whatever. Just because someone holds a different opinion doesn't mean that they have to be labelled racist or ageist.
I think here's the trick, right? When it comes to opinions about you, you want to be selective to who you pay attention to, and you want to be courageous enough to place weight on the opinions that matter, but also courageous enough to ignore and avoid the distractions of opinions from people who don't know you and who don't care about you. But when it comes to opinions about the world, you want to be curious.
Who matters to you in terms of what they think of you, and if they told you something? If the general public tell you something that you don't know about, that you haven't heard from before, what would you think of them?
I would think that it's potentially empowering in the sense if it relates to my career, my work, and what I do. It gives me the information to make an informed choice
Your
about
wife?
if I do something different.
Your wife?
My wife, opinions that matter.
It could be
right?
well said.
100%. And I tell you this right now, you can ask my wife about this. This will be completely unrelatable to you all. But I regularly hear opinions I disagree with. But then upon reflection, I think, actually, okay, there is some
true,
truth to
isn't
that.
it? Yeah.
So I have to be curious, right? I have to be curious, but also as well, I have to be really selective about who I place weight on.
Is she always right?
Yes.
Say yes. Always say yes.
I sense that you're very proud of what you've achieved and where you've been able to get. But here's the question: is pride a deadly sin?
Yeah, I don't, but that's the thing. I don't personally feel pride in terms of what I've done and achieved. I feel that my success is primarily dependent upon the opportunities other people have provided me. It's not a story of me pulling myself up by my own bootstraps. It's having had support and opportunities from other people who cared enough about me to actually give me a steer, give me a nudge, and give me opportunities to do better and be better. So I don't feel pride on that basis. I feel satisfied that I'm on the right path now, Mark, and I think that's what you detect. I don't think it's pride. I think it's satisfaction that I'm on the right path. And a big part of that is I know whose opinions matter, such as my wife, who I pay attention to, but also as well, I know what my values are. And on that basis, if I hear something from the general public, I can go, well, was I behaving in a way that's consistent with my values? Because that's my ultimate gauge and measure for myself. And at the end of my days, that's what my life will be determined on. Did I live a life that was true to me and what I placed value on? And if so, those opinions, those views, those are not going to be things that I'm concerned about. At the end of my days, I'm not going to be going, if only I'd had more likes on Facebook, if only I'd had less critical comments.
No, it matters.
You know?
No, it doesn't matter, that Facebook stuff. Hey, I admire what you do, and I admire who you are.
Oh, I appreciate it.
All the very best.
Very much.
We'll welcome you back again and again and again. Good stuff.
Awesome. Pleasure.
Big ups. And that's a like from us. That is motivational speaker Paul Wood. We're a few minutes